Good afternoon. They tell me I have 30 minutes. I'd love to take a lot more. My name is Bob Klimko. I'm the Director of Market Development for Orbis Corporation. I've been in this industry for over 30 years, and I can tell you it's a fantastic time to be in the reusable packaging space. But before I start, I noticed today that there was a lot of tension for some reason, maybe in the building, amongst your neighbors and friends. There's an election tomorrow. We all may have a little tension and a little angst about that, but there's one thing that we can agree to today at today's meeting, and that is reusable packaging is a tremendous common ground and a wonderful opportunity for all of us. Can I hear amen for that? Can I get some hands for that? All right. So we're going to talk today a little bit. Oh, I better forward the slide, right? We're going to talk today a little bit about why reusable, why companies are looking at reusable packaging. And I can share a lot of different factors and components about reusable packaging, but not all of our insights, because some of you may compete with us. So I got to be really careful because you're a smart group. I made myself some notes so I didn't forget a lot of things. Every application for reusable packaging, every opportunity at a customer is not one for reusable packaging. It has to make economic and environmental sense. And we're going to walk through a little bit about what that looks like in general for our end user customers today. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to do some components of reducing waste, driving supply chain cost savings, improving efficiencies, standardized workflow, and optimizing transportations. Many of you already know these components, but some of you might not. And so it's always a good reminder, a good refresher to know what that looks like. When we talk about efficiencies, it depends what you're talking about. We're lucky to be in reusable packaging because we're talking about a holistic view of efficiencies, all the way from the efficiencies to the pack size, to the truck that it's going into, to the cooler that it might end up in, to the shelf that it looks at. We're looking at all those efficiencies and how the product called reusable packaging flows through that supply chain. And so, is reusable packaging for every application? No. But it's for many applications that we need to understand the metrics and the numbers and the data associated with that. So it all starts off with thoughtful planning. And so whether you're dealing with a customer or a series of customers, the plan is the whole game, right? We all know that. And so what we like to do is we like to start off with what are the objectives for a given customer. What are they trying to accomplish? Whether it's a project, or sometimes you can back away from the project and ask them what they're trying to accomplish in their business. What are they trying to accomplish in your business? And try to tap into those inputs and see if those resonate with the project or the process that you're working on. Reusable packaging is a big disruption to some supply chains. There's a lot of things that go into factoring in to putting an efficient system in. So the thoughtful planning part about it, it sounds very common. It sounds like something that you'd normally do. But oftentimes we're ready to jump into a project without kind of taking a step back and saying, what are we trying to accomplish here? What are your objectives? What do you want to do with this project? How does this project relate to the rest of your business? Are there other projects that we can look at in conjunction with this one? That thoughtful planning is the key to success, and one of the things that we've learned at our company. Orbis was created in 1996, and I was part of the creation of that, which puts me at an age that is older than many of you. The O in Orbis stands for loop. And so it was intentional that we created the Orbis loop. And I'm not here to give a commercial about Orbis because we all sell reusable packaging or use it. But there's a reason that we're all in the environmental business. We're all already in the sustainability business. And so we need to know what that means. We need to know what that means from a quantitative perspective. So what we do is we try to have a 5-step process. The analyze process has us look at the entire supply chain and says, all right, what does it look like? What's the current state look like? It's almost as if we're a consultant. What's current state? What are the current metrics? What are we measured on? And then once we have all that buttoned down, we want to look at a client and a customer and say, is our understanding of the current reality what you understand as well? You want to affirm that, just not assume it, affirm it back to the customer. Then we're ready to move to the next step, and that's the prove session, or the prove step. And in the prove step, you're going to create some solutions. It might be on an individual project, or it might be on an entire supply chain or aspect of their supply chain. So you got to put that together and then have that prove step measured against what the current state is. So when we look at that, that's where data is really important. We're going to talk about that in a minute. We're trying to measure not only the economic impact, but the environmental impact. And those are, if you don't have the numbers in a reusable system on both ends, not just one, you're not solving the problem. We're not trying to sell something, we're trying to solve a problem. And the only way you solve a problem is through the numbers, through the metrics. You have to dig into it. In that analyze phase, you got to know what metrics they're measured against so that you can, whatever you propose in step 2, that you can measure against and see if there's some improvement or not. If you're not doing that, that's kind of basic, but that is what customers expect us to do. And that's what we need to do as an industry so we can move the demand curve up for reusables. So all of us are in the industry. There's probably more opportunity in the reusable business than we can all support. It's that good. It's that big. But we got to follow these steps. You have to follow those 2 main steps first. Then when we get into the design phase, now we're trying to design the solution that works. And the design phase isn't just about the product or the application that fits. Now we're talking about the information systems that it has to interface with. We're talking about the transportation system that it has to move through. We're talking about caring about empty packaging. We're in the reusable business. Everybody cares about packaging when it has something in it, but when it's empty, many customers don't care. That's our job. But if we don't care about empty packaging, it's not going to flow back. All those metrics that we did in step 1 and 2 on economics and environmental will fall down. We have to make sure that those turns, and all of that works together. Some of you already know this. Some of this is basic for you, but some of you don't. And the next step is implementation phase. And I always like to give this insight. At the implementation phase of a reusable system, there's certain stakeholders that haven't been involved in the process at all. You're working with a project lead, you're working with an engineer, you might be working with a finance person, and you're moving with that person in conjunction. They understand. Now you're going to try to implement and test. And we're going to run through that test, and you're going to affect people that are actually working on the project and touching the product. And they haven't been included at all. So if you don't have a stakeholder alignment process that lines up, that thinks about the worker and actually cares about the worker and their change, it's not going to be successful, because there have been many systems that follow the first 3 steps, but forget that stakeholder alignment step, and it's sabotaged. Doesn't work. This isn't going to work because of this, and this reason. The reason it's not going to work is because you haven't involved them in the process of design and development and implementation. So don't forget the stakeholders or the people that are actually interfacing with the packaging every day. Those people are just as vital as the CFO that you're selling the financial solution to. Make sense? Then what the evolve stage is, all right, what's the next system? What does the next opportunity look like for us? When you leave a customer, you don't leave them at the project and say, okay, I'll show up next year when we quote on your project again. Don't do that. Ask them for the next opportunity. What's the next opportunity that we can help you? Because you want to have that continuous relationship with the customer. That's what you're trying to build. You're trying to solve a problem. In fact, if you have a customer that has a need and you don't have the product, Tell them about the other places that they can find the product, because they'll come back to you as a trusted advisor if you do that. That's hard to do sometimes. You work on a project for a long time, and then you figure out, oh, shoot, we don't have the right solution here. Well, I could make them wait 9 months, but they really don't want to wait 9 months, and I know right around the corner there's a solution for them. I'm going to give them the right solution. They're going to find it anyway. I mean, they'll Google it up on the internet, and they'll find it anyway. You might as well help them. Help them so that you can become the trusted advisor they want you to be. Hopefully that made sense. Let's take a look at some keys to success that we've had throughout the years. The first one is kind of knowing what's happening in the supply chain strains. Now, some of these may resonate with your particular project, and some of them may not. But it's important to understand some of the things that are going on around you, not just in your world of selling to this customer, because it may affect them. The first one is disruptions are the new normal. Ability to be resilient and flexible is critical. So you might have a plan. We might have our little loop plan, and they might throw us for a loop because they're already down a path and they don't want to go down that path. Okay, it didn't work. We're going to be flexible enough to understand that the disruption is really affecting them. They might have a crisis that occurs, and we might have to help them solve a crisis. There might be one of our customers had a fire. They had a fire, and then we needed to stop the projects we were working on and provide them some standard products so they could keep running. So that's a disruption that we're not thinking about. We have to be empathetic about what they're trying to do. Customers expect more convenience and speed all the time. How does that affect your project? You just have to know these things and have that sort of as a filter from which guides you when you're thinking about solutions development for your customers. Companies seeking ways to mitigate disruptions and add operational efficiencies to their plants and DCs. Companies are more open to change than ever. Products need to move faster, safer, more cost-effective. These are all standards, filters that you need to have in your mind when you're developing solutions. The power of data, the most important slide that I have in this slide deck. The power of data. The best part about being in reusable packaging is we can quantify the economic and environmental benefit. The economic benefit is something that's been standard for many years. Cost savings project. How can we take your current state in that analyze phase, compare it to your future state, and save money? Where do we save money? Labor, transportation, warehouse space. There's a lot of different parameters. They all, if you're a finance person, they generally are in the operating expense reduction category. So the way you can affect a balance sheet, if you're talking to a CFO, it's 3 ways. Revenue enhancement, probably doesn't really, buying more of our stuff has them sell more of their stuff. Most CFOs won't give that to us. Operating efficiency reduction, labor, transportation, warehouse, they'll give us that one all day long because they know as is to be what it is. They'll know what that comparison is. That's an important one. The third one, if you care about, is capital utilization, and sometimes reusables can work if you're talking about pooling systems or rental programs and all that stuff. So 2 of the 3 main ingredients of a balance sheet we affect. That's pretty good. Not a lot of industries have that. And then with sustainability, there's the environmental quantifiable impact. How do we quantify the environmental impact? We don't sit and say, oh, our stuff is sustainable, it's green, it's great, it's reusable. No, that's not good enough. You kind of have to know what ISO 14040 is, life cycle analysis. That is the way to quantify the environmental benefit for reusable packaging, all right? So we need to have it, and so I had a fair bit of time in this space as our director of sustainability. Please never say that one package is more sustainable than another. That's not going to work, okay? That's not what it's about. What we're trying to do is reduce the environmental impact over a different package. So one is not better than another. If you say that to someone as a sustainability person, you're going to get a frown face really quick. But if you say to them, we're going to compare the environmental impact using life cycle assessment 14,040 on a number of different packages to see how much carbon and how much BTUs and solid waste are used. Then all of a sudden they're saying, oh, okay, I'll buy that because it's sanctioned. One is not better than the other. If you have that in any of your publications, take it out. It doesn't resonate, okay? I can guarantee you get a frown face. Quantifying the environmental impact is helping the environment, not selling against another product. Very big distinction. Does everybody get that? Okay. So we sell to CFOs and we sell to chief sustainability officers. Hand and glove. Sometimes they're the same person, often not. So it's a different message, it's a different story. Make sure you understand the message in the story. What does success look like? All right, so when we start a project, it's always important to ask, what's our success criteria? Then halfway through the project or throughout the project, check in, and then at the end, measure against that success criteria. Pretty easy, right? So during COVID, right before COVID, I became a coach. So if you come to a coaching session with me, we're gonna have a topic. If you don't have a topic, I'm not being coached, you are. So I'm gonna say, hey, what's the topic look like? What does success look like at the end of our session today? And then we'll go ahead and do some coaching. And then halfway through, I'll say, how are we doing against your success criteria? And sometimes you gotta pivot and sometimes you don't. Just like a project. Sometimes you gotta pivot, sometimes you don't. Then with about 10 minutes left, and then at the end, I'll say, how are we doing? How did we do against your success criteria? Same thing with the project. Same thing with the reusable product. Yes, there's all sorts of things that are listed here that could be important. Less downtime, reduced product damage, reduced waste, better trailer cube utilization, better internal cube, etc. But that's not your definition, that's theirs. And so we need to understand that and then check against it, because sometimes it changes. Sometimes it pivots. I see some nods out there. I know you know what that means. So if you're checking against that and then at the end measuring against it, then you have a successful project, a successful program, and then you're able to go on to the next one with the customer. The next key tip is to find advocates in your supply chain. All right, sometimes they're cost savings champions. You're working with a project lead usually, and if it's only that lead, sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes they're a gatekeeper to the rest of the organization. That's a different issue. But you want to have more than one constituent when we're talking about these systems, because they affect transportation people, they affect operations people, they affect the IT people, they affect the customer's customer. So we need to have those champions, and what do we need to do with them? We need to find out what success looks like for those constituents, because sometimes they're the same as the project lead and sometimes they're different. So everybody get that? So you're gonna have this posse of people at the customer that you've got 5 or 6 people that are stakeholders. Your lead person is going to have defined what success looks like for you. So you think you got it all done. Now you have all these other people that are introduced. The same question. What does success look like at the end of this project for you? Because that's where you're going to get into competing objectives potentially. And then you might want to raise those competing objectives back to your project lead and say, hey, I'm having some problems. Your transportation person is worried about their cost because it's going to go up temporarily, and your operations people are all ready to go, and they want us to move as fast as we can. How do we solve that for you as a customer, as a project lead? That's where you get your insights. So you're almost doing a voice of the customer within the customer. You're understanding what their needs are specifically, because some companies, believe it or not, are siloed. Imagine that. And they have different metrics. So we want to know what all those metrics are, because we're cutting across all that in reusable packaging. We cut across all those different functions. important key insight. Automation trends. Okay, so when I was growing up, a lot of people had 3, 4, 5 kids, all right? A lot of kids in our neighborhood. And then a few years after that, 10 years after that, it went down to 3 or 4, 2 or 3. Now it's 1 or 2 or none. So all that population stuff caught up, right? And so now we all have the problem or the issue or the opportunity of finding people to work our jobs, all right? Not an easy thing. Not easy for any of us. If you're talking to your customer or you're talking to your company, one of the key challenges that we're going to face in the next 10 to 20 years is getting people to work in the jobs that we need, right? That's not easy, all right? And so we need to understand that reality, and then automation comes in, right? So we got some automation that may or may not impact your project. So there's a lot of automation stats that I could read to you, but I really care about whether or not automation makes sense on your project. And if it does, how does the reusable packaging interface with that automation that the customer may be putting in regardless of reusable packaging? They might be putting in automation and then they need to find reusable packaging that fits it, or ideally they do it together. Some do, some don't. But understand why automation is occurring. It's not to take away jobs. It's really not to do that. It's because there aren't people there to do the jobs. That's what's happening. That's why the big growth is occurring. And so we need to figure out how reusable packaging fits into that scenario, what project, what business, how it's working. But it's really important to understand why it's all occurring. Hopefully it makes sense. Piloting the project. So most customers aren't going to give you a project without testing it out. And our tests at our place are pretty methodical. And they're methodical on purpose. If you hurry one of these systems up, you probably will miss some key factors. Maybe it's stakeholder alignment. Maybe you missed some parts of the supply chain that you put in that weren't included in the initial scope. All sorts of things that can happen. But we want to validate all the metrics that we talked about in the most important slide that I talked about. We want to validate those in reality, not on a piece of paper. And sometimes that can go slow because some supply chains have to have testing that occurs with the reusable packaging because it touches the product. And sometimes not. Sometimes the tests are easy. Sometimes they're just matter of fact, and you're just re-upping and doing a same application only in a different model. And sometimes it's brand new. I would be empathetic with the customer and really understand what that means to them by understanding what success looks like at the beginning of the project, and that's where you'll uncover it. But piloting the project is important. Just realize that they all don't look the same. They're all a little bit different, depending on what the supply chain is, what the application is, what the customer is doing, and how the packaging interfaces with their final product. Because that's really what's important, their final product. Protection, flavor. There's all sorts of parameters that are important to them based on the given supply chain. That's what we're testing. We want to test the packaging. They have lots of other things that they may need to test as well. Got to do a time check because I'm getting a little excited here. I'm still okay. End of life planning. As I get older, I'm starting to think about that for myself, but we're talking about packaging here. End of life, begin with the end in mind. What are we going to do with this packaging stuff when it's done? What are we going to do? Where does it go? Some parts of the world are starting to regulate that. They're trying to tell us what we need to do with that. We want to kind of get ahead of that. You don't want to wait for regulation. You want to have a plan for what you're going to do with the packaging when it's done. Because it's reusable. It's going to move. It's going to go for years. Sometimes some of them have been in existence for a couple decades, but you still have to have a plan. Are you gonna take the material back and make it into something else? Are you going to recycle components of it? It's not necessarily that easy. Sounds easy, but it's not. So you have to have a plan for what that looks like and make sure that that's part of the conversation with the customer in the initial planning phases. Because that's going to tell them that you actually do care about what happens on your environmental impacts, right? If you don't ask the question, then they're going to think, oh, if they have to ask the question, probably get like a C in that grade grade score. If you say we have a plan for the end of life, we want to run by you. What are your expectations? Talk about it. Factor it into part of your fabric. We're in the reusable industry, but we're also in the environmental sustainability business as an industry. Let's make sure that we're taking that to heart. Overcoming obstacles. So I told you a little bit about the loop that we have, the evolve that sets up the next project. All right, so we want to make sure that we're doing that. We also want to make sure that we're supporting the supply chain, initial investment, getting the payback that they want, stakeholder alignment, plan for end of life, leverage success and processes for the next opportunity. But most importantly is we're trying to solve problems here. We're not trying to sell reusable packaging. Let me say that again. We're trying to solve problems that a customer has, not sell reusable packaging. The selling will naturally occur if we're solving the problems. And that means that we have to understand all the things that we talked about here and the key insights, right? That means we have to really care about what their objectives are. We have to care what success looks like. We have to care so much that we might give the customer one of the names of our competitors to solve their problem. That's how much we want to care. All right? It's not easy for everybody. I'm competitive as the next guy, but I've done it before. I've done it because I know that customer will come back to me as their trusted advisor. That's supporting your supply chain. I know you got to get the metrics down environmentally, economically. I know we got to align the stakeholders. I get all that. You guys get all that. But what you really want to get is you want to be their trusted advisor. And you have to earn that by doing the right thing. My last slide. Omira Khan, I'm going to read this to you because some of you might be in the back. We are seeing an extraordinary impact on global supply chains to really change the way they tackle these disruptions. Companies need to change the way they work and think. Companies to think more sustainably and more locally. That was from the professor of supply chain management at Royal Holloway University, Omira Khan. And I'll leave you with this. I started the presentation with there's a little angst in the building and some tension in our country here because we have an election. But one of the things that we can rally around as an industry is that reusable packaging is something that has a positive impact on our stakeholders, on our customers, and on future generations of humans in a positive way. And with that, I'll take your questions. Yeah, I'm gonna. If you can tell me is there a microphone for the questions? That's great. Otherwise, I would. It's right here. And if you could state your name and what company you're from, because people want to know that sometimes, not just some question. All right, so that would be good. And it would be nice if you stood up as well. I'm going to put you on the spot. Sorry. I had to be up here for 30 minutes. You can be up there for a little. Come on.
That's fair. Samina from Maple Lodge Farms. We're poultry manufacturers. I wanted to ask you, corrugate versus reusable totes. Which one do you think would help environment more if we stick to it? Because there's a lot of discussions around it.
Corrugated, I think the question is corrugated versus reusable totes. And what's the application?
Just to pack fresh chicken trays.
Fresh chicken trays? All right, so if you were my customer, I would say it depends. What I would do is we want to go walk through your supply chain and see how it works. We'd want to understand the metrics of what's happening today, both environmentally and economically. So we'd measure that benchmark. And then we'd have that. And then we would propose some solutions that may or may not work. We'd have to look at the equipment interfaces to make sure that whatever package was selected would work. And then we would try those out. We would try those we would test those. But the first thing that we would do is we would run an economic and an environmental analysis to see if it made sense to even test them. Because based on a lot of different inputs that you have, and most of the folks out here will have an input sheet that says what the size of the packaging is, what's your volume, where are your ship tos, all those sorts of things, right? And so they'll put those into their economic calculator, and out will pop a theoretical, here's how much you can save based on how you finance, so whether you buy, lease, rent, all those sorts of parameters. And here's the environmental impacts on today's versus tomorrow's. Because today's, the corrugated packaging, you might recycle. So you have to factor all those sorts of things in. It's really pure. It's not selling, it's data. It's data analysis, one versus the other. Now the problem was some companies might not have that data analyst. That is tough. Not the end user. Some of our people in our audience, our reusable people, might not have that. But without it, I'm telling you, you have to have it, because without that, this woman is not going to be able to answer that question. I'm not going to be able to answer that question for you. And then what you do, let's say we had a theoretical, looked like it was going to work. Then we would try some products that it looked like it was going to work for and see if it actually works. So you've got you have a question. Go ahead, add on.
So there's not a general answer to it, then it's
No,
case
I would
by
never
case.
say one is better than the other ever without doing the work.
Understood.
If someone comes in and says that, run. It's not, if they're not willing to do the work, next. They got to do the work.
So one of the main problems we have is the space. With corrugates, and not us, the retailers. With corrugates, they just take the product out, they throw it.
Right.
For recycling, of course, not
Right.
The totes, where do they keep them?
Yeah, so the question was, if you didn't hear, the question was space. The amount of space that a reusable takes. It's obviously got thicker sidewalls sometimes. It takes up space versus a corrugated they throw out. So I don't know if there's a general answer to that question, right? I think it's part of the analysis process and part of the solution development. So I think you have to factor that in and see. Because there's some companies in the audience that might just rent those to you on a per use basis, and then you don't have to worry about the space. When they're empty, you blow them out the door, and then somebody else's problem. So that's one solution. There's several solutions that could work based on what your use case is.
Okay.
Make sense? All right, thanks. How much more time do I have? I'm done, huh? All right, thanks, Tim. Thank you.